everybody. This is the Lamley Saturday Showcase, and I'd imagine that most of you are very familiar with this car you are looking at right now. For those who are not familiar, this is the Hot Wheels Datsun Bluebird 510. More specifically, this is the BRE or Brock Racing Enterprises number 46, driven by John Morton. Not only a famous race car, but this is in itself has become a very famous Hot Wheels car. Some are familiar with it because of its extravagant secondary market price. It's a very expensive car. Some for its heavy detail, and some just because it's the first of several BRE cars that we've seen from Hot Wheels, including just recently in the RLC Car Culture set. We saw the number 35 in blue. But while this is a very famous Hot Wheels, I'm not sure if a lot of you are familiar with the series it came from. This particular car came from the 2011 Hot Wheels Vintage Racing Series. I have slowly but surely been working on collecting this, and I have about half the models, including two that just arrived. And I'm going to go ahead and open them up today and show you the half of the vintage racing set I have. It's the Smoky Unix, I hope I said that right, Chevelle Tribute, and as well as Smoky Unix 67 Camaro in that really cool gold and black. So we are going to walk through these models. I'll go ahead and remove the 510 and start with what I've got. And we start with this one. This is the Sox and Martins 73 Plymouth Duster. Almost every model, with the exception of the 510, are replicas of American race cars. Most of them from the Trans Am and other quote-unquote vintage racing circuits or series. Some of these castings are new to this. Were new to this set. They were new tools. Others were modified. Others were brand new. Others were just existing castings. I'm not sure if the Plymouth Duster had been around before with this in this particular form, but this is one. And they were done to replicate the cars that they, the racing cars that they came from. This is Dick Landy's Dodge Challenger. The name Dick Landy is very familiar to a lot of American race car fans, and we've seen his name on several Hot Wheels. I don't know if he showed up on others in the vintage racing series. Almost all of these are licensed models. You can see this one has that cool rake. I think the first Dodge Challenger, this casting originally didn't have the rake, but I think this was done for vintage racing. All right, from Mopar to Bowtie, this is Dave Strickler's 70 Chevy Camaro RS. This one, I can't remember if this casting originated here, but with that huge hood intake, I think this is, I think that was original to the vintage racing set. Dave Strickler, we also saw one of his cars, I think the Dodge Coronet, I believe, from the Drag Strip Demons. He may have been in some others as well. We haven't seen Hot Wheels do a ton of these kind of vintage racing series lately, but they do have a history of doing them in the premium series. All right, this is one of two. I think I've shown these before. This is George Fulmer's 1970 Ford Mustang Boss 302. I have mentioned how much I love this casting, and this is where this casting originated. This is the number 16. There's also Parnelli Jones, number 15, right there. Not a ton of difference, but these are two different race cars. The numbers are different, the rims are different, and there's a few other details if you look closely. You have to kind of put them together. Shall I put them together? Of course I should. Here they are together. You can see the grills are different, obviously the wheels. You can also get a sense of how detailed these models are. Not only on the bodies and the paint, but the tires. I think almost every tire, if they had like the Goodyear or something else on there, I think they were done. This is Firestone, I think, for both of these. Moving on to Darrell Waltrip's Mercury Cyclone. Check out the grill on that one. I don't know if we've seen this model again, maybe in garage. But again, from the trunk and the hood pins to the numbers to the two-tone paint. hopefully as you're seeing more and more of these, you're going, man, these are cool. Sometimes I name these series, it's why you should be collecting like Boulevard or Modern Classics or whatever. You should definitely be collecting vintage racing. Because while you may not be totally into vintage American racing, these cars are fantastic. They just don't make them like this anymore. And in the Hot Wheels world, they don't really make them like this anymore. This is Dan Gurney's AAR CUDA. Check out the hood. Check out the rims. I love the rainbow on the front and the back. Okay, I mentioned that most of these are licensed. I am not sure if this one is. This one may have been made up. This is the 64 Ford Galaxie, Morse Ford. My guess, and this is complete speculation, is there were 30 cars slated for this series, but you obviously have to get not only the model, but the racing deco and everything else licensed. And maybe there were a few that fell through, and Hot Wheels said, well, we can get creative. And so I'm guessing that this one may be made up. I could be wrong. Well, no, actually, no. I'll say Mark Morse. You guys can tell me if I'm wrong. This is one of the all-timers from the set. This is Sam Posey's 70 Dodge Challenger. I mentioned that I think the other Dodge Challenger I showed you, I don't know if it had the rake. Well, this one is, I believe, started as a Hot Wheels basic, but if you see this swing around, you'll see what was added. That crazy chin spoiler. But if you look this car up, if you look up Sam Posey's Dodge Challenger, this is one of the more famous Trans Am race cars, and you'll see it in races today too, because it just has that great spoiler, great color, all these cool details. This light green color. This is not only one of the cooler Trans Am race cars, but Hot Wheels just nailed this one. And I love that they added the chin spoiler to it. They probably could have gotten away without doing it because this car is so famous, but I'm so glad they did. Okay, here's the first of the two I opened today. This is Sonny Unix Tribute Chevelle. You can find this car if you look it up on, if you Google it or something, you will see this actual car. This was a new tool in this series, and we've seen it a few times since. We've seen it in Boulevard. We've seen it, I think, in one other racing, maybe Garage. And then we saw it as the finale model at the LA convention last year. I have been wanting to get this model, and I finally found it for a decent price. It has been increasing in price quickly and rapidly, and I'm very happy that I found it for a good price, because how pretty is this? I think it was originally painted in gold, and then Hot Wheels added the full black side tampos to make it look like the two-tone paint. But this one is pretty, and it matches up perfectly with the Camaro, which I'll show in just a second. But in between these two, based on the numbers, is this one. I've talked enough about this one, but it's the only non-American car in this series, even though it was raced here in the United States. So it makes sense. It fits into this theme. There might have been some Euro cars that would have been appropriate too, but this was, at the time, the Datsun 510 was such a peg warmer. No one was picking it up, and this was one of the famous ones that just hung and hung and hung on the pegs. And I've said this before, this one hung at a local Kmart of mine, about 3 or 4 of them, for well over a year. I picked up a couple of them and then left some. They were finally picked up, and you know the rest is history. People are paying $300 to get this thing. Crazy, right? Well, that's how things change. In comparison, people were bypassing the 510 to get to this one, and that's obviously not a surprise. This is the 67 Camaro, Sonny Unix 67 Camaro, done in the same style as the Tribute Chevelle. Gold top, black bottom, and the two-tone paint. This is the other one I opened today. This is the original 60s, not the original, but the 80s casting with the opening hood and the metal base. And you can see both of these together. They make quite the pair. I am looking forward to photographing these. There's probably more stories to these both being the number 13. Obviously, one is the tribute car and the other is the race car, maybe. But you'll see replicas of these as well. I don't mean in the toy world, in the real world racing, in those vintage racing circuits. Okay, moving on to one of the most iconic of the racing decos. This is Richard Petty's number 43 Plymouth GTX. There are at least 2 or 3, I think 3 other Richard Petty cars in this series. I only have one. I need more. The Superbird, the Roadrunner, which one am I missing? I think the Torino Talladega. Some of you might be familiar with this color combination from the Cars Pixar series, right? But that was a tribute to Richard Petty, as is this replica of the GTX. And speaking of iconic, Mark Donahue's 71 AMC Javelin. You're seeing a similar look with the Javelin that's in the new 50th set that some of you are finding. But this is the actual replica. They had done a Javelin before for basic, Hot Wheels did, but they redid this entire casting in more of a racing style for vintage racing, and we've seen that casting used a little bit since. This is probably a top 3 for me in the vintage racing series. Kind of hard. I think the Brie goes up there. I think the Chevelle, the Challenger. I don't know if I can pick a top 3, but if I had to, I will make sure that this one is in there. This is iconic. It's such a cool looking car. Okay, we finish with Junior Johnson's 65 Ford Galaxie 500. This one seems even more vintage than the other models. It's a very simple racing deco. Love the color. Love the rims on this one. So that's what I have. Those are the 15 vintage racing cars that I have in my collection. I'm hoping to get the other 15 over time. Might take me a while, but maybe I'll do an update a little bit later. My favorite, well, it's the Brie 510, but you've seen enough of that. I'd put the Mustangs up there. I'd put the Challenger. Who knows? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this Saturday showcase. We've got much more to come. Thanks, everybody. Bye.